Hi, welcome back to Dr. G's channel. So here today we are talking about a follow-up on the affair recovery that we have started a couple of videos on. If you haven't seen those, I think we have created another 2 or 3 videos already about what is affair, how it comes to be, what are the components that lead to it, and actually that's quite interesting and mind-opening for or eye-opening for people who just wondering why affairs even exist. Please do watch those. It's going to be a prequel to this video, which is getting into specifics of what to do. We had covered also what not to do. A lot of times most people kind of engage in the wrong steps, and we don't want you to do those. So if you haven't watched those videos, please do watch them before you get to this one. So here what I would like to talk about is the fact that, you know, when part of a person's kind of reaction to the situation certainly needs to be figuring things out, but instead of figuring it on your own, really what would be helpful is to kind of have this almost collaborative approach together with your partner to figure out what hasn't been working. And we have alluded to the fact that we really know, in terms of the, if you will, the core of the issue is this distance that exists in terms of intimacy, closeness, understanding, and validation between two individuals, and that when you have that gap and distance, affair plugs right in and kind of fills that gap. So in other words, affairs really kind of exist to a greater extent to almost keep the main relationship alive for whatever reasons that are kind of valid, but also subsidize, if you will, and compensate the deficits that a person feels within that relationship by balancing those deficits and filling in those deficits with a secondary relationship. So that type of gap and distance is maintained by the way two people actually interact with one another. So when we talked about how to go about fixing a relationship in the midst of an affair, or you know, kind of post-affair, if you will, is the truth that you will need to really pay attention to the reason this gap is being maintained, to the parameters, to the factors that lead to the maintenance of the gap, which is going back to that lack of communication and understanding and appreciation of one another. So therefore the solution too lies in fixing this more collaboratively, rather than just one person trying to play the detective and fixing everything, because then it becomes completely opposite of what you want. It really leads more to a sense of invalidation, maybe even overpowering, overwhelming, and almost like a controlling and even demeaning and less empathic type of a state or approach or proposition toward your partner, which then increases the need for the affair, increases the need for, you know, seeking comfort outside of the relationship. So keep in mind that you need to go about this collaboratively, which means that we have stated before, you want to open up a conversation about the fact that, you know, reality, that both of you feel kind of distant to each other. And the idea here is to really ask yourselves, you know, and invite, first of all, do an inventory for yourself, and then invite your partner to do an inventory for themselves. Why this distance exists, and do you guys want to keep that distance? Is that a status quo that you're okay with? You really don't want to dig in deeper into it because it can create some more conflict at times, or you're afraid that it can get worse, or you believe that it cannot be solved at all, or other reasons? Or do you want to just simply end it, like noticing that this is not an ideal situation, also not even a desirable situation anymore, to the point where you may feel that you're actually realizing you're wasting your time. So kind of spreading yourself too thin across two different relationships, and you're not completely happy here, you're not completely happy there, and why put up with this? So maybe you're much better off to again also collaboratively realize that it's not a workable situation, so you're better off moving on. Now, however, most of the time what happens is when you open this conversation up, actually there is if there is some feelings, if there are some feelings or some value or some appreciation or some type of a caring and anything left between the two partners that they actually would love to reignite between themselves or maintain and kind of grow, they see it as almost like a missed opportunity. They don't know how they got there, but they don't like the status quo, and in fact they do care a lot about each other. They do want one another as the main partner in their relationship, as the only partner in their relationship. They want to solidify this main relationship. They don't want to have an affair. Then there is that opportunity for growth and for kind of meeting of the minds. And if that's the case, then you could come together and really repair the relationship. Now, what I would suggest is there are stages of affair repair that you would need to go through. And because it is very complex, and also for other reasons that I will mention, you would want to get a therapist or counselor, a psychologist, someone who is specializing in affair repair or recovery to help you. Now, what are those stages? The first stage is basically that type of more or less admission. Rather than denying the situation, you both have to come to terms that accept the reality and admit that there is a problem. More or less, the affair is a symptom of the problem. So admitting that there is an affair really comes secondary to admitting that there is a problem in the relationship, and that needs to be fixed, and that problem is being solved currently by having this extra relationship. So when you come to that admission, then the next step is really to kind of make a decision. Do you want to call it off, or do you want to repair it? If you want to repair the relationship, then the next stage really becomes about more or less authenticity, honesty. It's trust repair of that broken trust, which requires a very kind of detailed, very specific type of and very methodical type of a dissection of what has happened, to some extent, not too much of details, but to some extent a few specifics about the affair, and ending the affair, and moving on, more or less. So that all by itself is almost like a very complex stage itself, and that's why I suggest that you do it with a therapist or counselor who is specializing in this. And there are good reasons for that. Now let me share that with you. For instance, number one, you can't be just too vague about revealing that there was an affair, because if you're just too vague, then the person who has had the affair cannot regain the trust of the person who has been cheated on. So there needs to be some minimal set of specifics in literally attempting to regain the trust of the other person, and more or less alleviating their concern, removing the confusion that they may have, because someone who doesn't know anything about an affair, they can think everything about it. So they get too confused, they get too overwhelmed. And so the specificity would help reducing that confusion and overwhelming experience, and literally just kind of containing it and creating a kind of a confined situation that we can actually deal with and get over with. For instance, who is that other person? how did it come to be, how often it, the relationship or how long it has lasted, but it's almost the extent of the intimacy, without again too many revealing details. For instance, if there was a one-time romantic get-together in a, let's say, restaurant, going on a date is different than like a few months or a year or two or more of actual intimate relationship with sexual experience, with romantic getaways, almost like a double life, living a double life, a very loving romantic type of a experience, versus only a sexual pleasure or non-sexual kind of an emotional connection. All those types of connections with another person help the specificity to help the person who is kind of confused and lost literally wrap their mind around what is it specifically that they need to deal with, to what extent more or less have their, if you will, lost their connection to their partner, lost their value to their partner, lost almost their power in the relationship. There are many things that a person who has been cheating on is going to wonder and go through. So some clarification would be helpful for them to really come to terms with almost an internal state of mind that where they are at, are they for themselves to kind of make a decision. Knowing this specificity, then they can calm down a little bit and not fantasize about millions of things, and decide, well, if my partner, for instance, if this was just an emotional connection and not a sexual connection, then okay, can I deal with this or not? Is that something I'm okay with? Can I overcome that issue? Like, where can we repair our emotional connection? If we can, then okay, our sex is good. If our emotional connection is going to be even better, then that's good for me, or vice versa. So that type of decision making is important for the person who's been cheated on. The specificity of the situation can help clarifying that. And then the other reason also that we don't want to go into too much detail is because revisiting the issue, the affair, the story, the narrative about a secondary relationship is very traumatic for the person who's been cheated on. It's also traumatic to some extent to the person who has been having the affair, because now they have to face their own embarrassment, shame, feelings of guilt, responsibilities, inadequacy, their own pain, why the deficiency in the relationship even has led to the affair, if you will, mistakes that they have made, and regrets that they have had, and also current pain that they have to go through in addressing more or less two hurt parties, actually three hurt parties. There's two people that are involved, person plus the person who has had the affair. So it is painful for both. It is very traumatic for the person who's been cheated on. Therefore, too much details would just kind of lead to more pain and more injury and more trauma, right? Without a really beneficial goal coming out of all those details. So it's not really important in terms of minute by minute or hour by hour or day by day kind of a accounting of every single thing that has been said, every single action that has been done, every single emotion that has been expressed, every single affection that has been exchanged. All those details are hurtful, not necessary, not useful. So that's the other part too, when two partners don't really know the more or less boundaries around how much of specificity is too much, how little is too little. And they don't know that a therapist who specializes in this type of work can be helpful, can set the guidelines, the boundaries, the kind of the plan of action to help the couple to go through this and help both of them to wrap their mind around what they're doing, how they can benefit from this type of a discovery, if you will, and lead the discovery and the results of the discovery into the next stage, which is literally putting this affair behind them, kind of in the past, and starting to literally connect with each other, communicate with one another, and repair that bond that has been lost. Everything that they have been missing in the relationship and they have sought outside of the relationship can be rebuilt within the relationship. So all their focus and energy needs to go toward the current main relationship, and you can only do that if you can close that other chapter of discovery and put it behind you and kind of commit to the new relationship. It's not going to be easy. It's in fact very, very difficult, because now you have committed to put an end to the other affair and really just focus on the main relationship. Therefore, you're missing out on this extra support or extra channel for venting or pleasure or comfort or companionship or understanding or appreciation, whatever. Therefore, you have to really muster up a lot more energy and courage and really psychological tools, if you will, and emotional tools to be able to walk through this heat and really face the your anxieties, your fears, your everything that you haven't dealt with in the past. Now, for many people, it is worth it, and I've seen it in front of my eyes. I've worked with couples who have been through that, and they have come out, so to say, victoriously from this journey, from this battle, almost psychological battle, emotional battle. And as a result, they have grown, and they have grown to actually love each other a lot more than before, and fully, to a point where they're completely happy with what they have and literally have evolved as a human being. And they could not have imagined anything else any better than this in their lives. And now they possess that they're in a state of bliss, and it's unbelievable when you watch this transformation happen, and you see how a human being, a couple, can actually grow over this setback and failure in their relationship that reflects back on their own self. They become a much more solid and much more empowered human being in and of themselves. And now they are together with another person who is as equally empowered, and this is just an amazing, mind-boggling experience that they have, and they literally feel utterly happy, to an utmost extent. And there's nothing better than that in their entire life, and they can pass that on to others, to their kids, to their family members. They become role models for others, how to overcome such deficiencies in relationships and differences between people, and kind of making wrong mistakes and wrong decisions, and making these mistakes and learning from them, and going through failures and this like self-doubt and self-deprecation, but also come out happily in the end. So ultimately, this is what I wanted to talk about. Let me know if you have any questions. I appreciate your comments, questions. I'd like to address those, and subscribe if you haven't. Watch out for our next video, in which I will talk about kind of more or less the side of the person who has an affair. Most of the videos have been more kind of dealing with the entire situation with a with a tendency to speak from the perspective and with a focus on what's happening for the person who has been cheated on. But this next video will be specifically more for the person who has an affair, who is struggling with that, who doesn't know how to end it or deal with it, how to, kind of come around and get back on track with the main relationship. Stay tuned. Thank you.